Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Kusum Menon.
Good afternoon. It gives me great pleasure to introduce this year's Lifetime Achievement Award winner, Dr. Deborah Cook. Dr. Cook is a distinguished professor of medicine, clinical epidemiology, and biostatistics at McMaster University in Canada, and is an active intensive care physician who practices at St. Joseph's Healthcare in Hamilton. As academic chair of critical care medicine at McMaster University, she holds a Tier 1 Canada Research Chair in Intensive Care Medicine from the Canadian Institutes of Health Research and was a founding member and chair of the Canadian Critical Care Trials Group. Dr. Cook has published over 700 peer-reviewed articles related to randomized controlled trials, life support technology, preventing complications of critical illness, end-of-life care, and research ethics. Her numerous honors include Fellowship in the Royal Society, CIHR's Distinguished Lectureship, Gold Leaf Award for Impact, and the National Deborah J. Cook Mentorship Award, which was created to recognize her monumental commitment to training emerging scholars. She was also recently appointed an Officer of the Order of Canada for her scientific leadership in improving global intensive care. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to my friend, mentor, and role model, Dr. Cook, as she presents a clinician-scientist journey, career reflections, and lessons learned.
Sincere thanks to SCCM for this huge honor of a Lifetime Achievement Award. Actually, my very first conference as a critical care fellow at Stanford was an SCCM meeting. I was terrified presenting a poster on cortisol levels and septic shock, but I was encouraged by some constructive critique and inquiries made in front of my poster. And I was also struck by the interprofessional nature of attendees. And I knew right then that I'd found a great critical care community home at SCCM. I'm grateful to hundreds of people who've enriched my career over the years, colleagues, comrades, teachers, trainees, friends and family, including work family. I've always appreciated my clinical colleagues in the ICU and in the hospital and learned so much as a clinical investigator from stellar research coordinators, Nicole Zatarg, France Clark, and Ellen McDonald, to name a few. My story is really a reflection of everybody's influence, and I dedicate this award to all of those people, as well as the patients and the families for whom I've had the privilege to care. Today I was invited to speak about anything at all, and I decided to share some personal reflections through the retrospectoscope. Some field observations were made, but I confess this is experience-based, not evidence-based, and there was no literature review involved. I have 5 messages to share, and you might consider these my own lessons learned. The first is be brave. Whatever we try to achieve in our career, we all face obstacles. We need to learn how to navigate inevitable bumps in the road, and sometimes the path is unclear, especially if we take the road less traveled. In my early university days as an aspiring scientist, I was seeking a particularly challenging project. After a couple conversations with the prospective supervisor, he advised, "I just don't think research is in your future." This statement haunted me for a while until I had the courage to initiate another project with a different supervisor. Eventually, I went on to pursue a master's degree in clinical epidemiology and biostatistics and became the first intensivist formally trained in clinical research in Canada. Later, as a young faculty member, after presenting a protocol for our first survey on nurse and physician views about withdrawal of life support, a senior colleague wondered aloud if it was actually unethical. That was shattering at the time and is still shocking I thought it was unethical not to do the study, given that withdrawal of life support preceded most deaths in ICU. Following encouragement from my wonderful mentor, Dr. Gordon Guyatt, and our open-minded Canadian Critical Care Trials Group, we forged ahead. And ultimately, this survey helped to open up the field and was published in JAMA. I've found in medicine, there's sometimes a hidden agenda to retain the status quo, a pressure to conform and not rock the boat. Asking questions, and particularly questioning authority and conventional wisdom, can be unsettling to people. Witness the early evidence-based medicine movement I was privileged to help lead in our field. A sea change, but initially discredited and sometimes still deliberately misinterpreted in conservative circles. I've always tried to identify fruitful fields of research at the watershed of different specialties. Given the clinical and research strength in both critical care and thrombosis in my university a few years ago, I asked some thrombosis scientists what they thought about embarking on some studies at the nexus of critical care and thrombosis. All but two actively dissuaded me. With these two individuals and interested ICU colleagues around the world, we forged ahead and completed a multi-method, multi-project research program on venous thrombosis in the ICU over the next 10 years. This experience was one of many that taught me that you should take every opportunity to hear other perspectives and either reconsider or reaffirm your own. No matter what you do in your career, it's essential to talk to people with different points of view. No matter how open-minded you may be, some people may frown, others may politely disengage. I've learned it's okay to agree to disagree on occasion. Sometimes dialogue is more important than consensus, and sometimes you need to trust your gut. As George Bernard Shaw said, life isn't about finding yourself, it's about creating yourself. I found you're not growing unless you're getting outside of your comfort zone, getting comfortable with risk and uncertainty. You're not growing unless you're changing. Look, listen, and solicit advice along the way, but cultivate your own views and judgment. I've learned that defining moments for bravery could be right in front of you. They may come along when you least expect them. This might be your time to be brave, perhaps to create or innovate. Being brave is so important when you're young, but it's never too late to be brave. My second lesson learned is be humble. As we all know, critical care is a specialty marked by complexity, information mastery, and technical prowess, often at warp speed. This confidence crusade manufactures a sense of objectivity in practice and science, which conceals the reality of uncertainty. The constant drive for sharing performance excellence also mitigates against the culture of humility. So I find pride to be very prevalent and humility to be in short supply in our field. Humility encourages presumptions to be challenged and questions to be posed. Humility means being able to say, I don't know. Humility also means acknowledging when you need help. I remember when we started our first CHR-funded randomized clinical trial of ranitidine versus sucralfate for stress ulcer prophylaxis. Talk about humbling. Every month, it felt like we were climbing a mountain. Following submission of our interim report, which outlined slow but steady progress, funding was not renewed mid-trial. We had two choices, give up or regroup and press on. And we chose the latter. With enormous gratitude to clinical mentors and dedicated colleagues such as Dr. John Marshall, We creatively problem solved and redoubled efforts. No question, I've learned so much more from such struggles in life than smooth sailing. You've got to grow through what you go through. This trial was eventually completed and published in the New England Journal of Medicine, and acid suppression for ventilated patients became the standard of care for the next 30 years. I really believe we also need scientific humility as a critical care community. As data emerge and the landscape changes, so much we. The Declaration of Helsinki reminds us that even the best so-called proven interventions must be evaluated continually through research for their safety and effectiveness. This year, with colleagues in Australia, Saudi Arabia, the UK, and elsewhere, we're launching the vanguard phase of another trial in stress ulcer prophylaxis, challenging the currency and the veracity of our original findings on acid suppression from years ago. As individuals and as a community, we need to stay humble. My third lesson learned is be humane. I've always believed in the sanctity of the patient-clinician relationship. This focus has never sent me down the wrong path. To me, medicine is not a job or a trade, but it's a calling. However, I've often felt like a fish out of water, especially these days when patient is client, clinician is provider, and the family is a visitor. And when healthcare is riddled with business lexicon, corporations focusing on efficiencies and economics. Having grown up, professionally speaking, in 2 departments at an incredible university, McMaster, where rigorous observations, experiments, and measurements were fundamental to the academic culture, this created a positivist view of science, and it was perpetuated through most of my training. I remember in fellowship at Stanford University, I was captivated, though, with the excellent physiologic teaching that was augmented with attention to clinical ethics. Upon returning to Canada, however, I was actively discouraged from pursuing a study on the ethical dimensions of end-of-life care by a senior academic authority. He told me the topic was soft science, or actually not science. His advice, verbatim, was that this was not serious enough for a serious investigator like you. So for years I felt closeted. End-of-life care was a special locus of my practice and a favorite focus of my teaching. I quietly kept end-of-life research alive while pursuing epidemiologic investigations and randomized clinical trials on other topics. Fast forward 25 years, the idea for our 3 Wishes project germinated at an end-of-life conference I had organized for the Canadian Academy. I've invited a scholarly provocateur to the final session to spice it up. And at the end of the day, he threw down the gauntlet, urging everyone there to stand up and answer, what are you going to do to make a tangible difference in this field when you go home? Without realizing it, I'd been preparing for this moment without giving the 3 Wishes project a voice or a name. So rekindling acts of compassion at the bedside, several of us began to more deliberately elicit and implement individualized terminal wishes for dying patients, trying to ease the grief of family members left behind. By connecting to purpose this way, the 3 Wishes project has made work so much more meaningful, enhancing our sense of vocation by honoring the lives lived in the face of death. The soul of the 3 Wishes project has been career enriching for me personally and culture changing for many in our unit. As qualitative interviews across North America indicate, we are not alone. Humanity doesn't always have an invitation to the table today in healthcare, but for me, humanity is the foundation for everything we do. Stay humane. My 4th lesson is to lend a hand. Lend a hand to your colleagues. I found that most clinical investigators are on a quest to make a difference, discover something, advance a topic, answer a question, inform practice or policy. I've always tried to be there for them when it matters most. I try to bring my A game to their table, not just my own. Whatever the cause, yours or someone else's, it usually takes a village. Early in my career, I was so busy being busy that I didn't fully realize the importance of enrichment through conversation. I sometimes wish I'd been more deliberate, sustaining a contemplative and conversational life. I'm much better now at disciplining myself to disconnect from devices and connect with colleagues. I'm well aware of the slippery slope of multitasking and digital dependency. I listen more and talk less. I try to eat, drink, dance, and celebrate, but not be afraid to cry. I try to spend time with people who help me to be my best self and do the same in return. I seek collaborators with shared values and recognize authentic friendships. As we all have been reminded during this pandemic, and as we will celebrate soon, meeting and talking face to face still matters. Lend a hand to young people. This was a guiding principle of another mentor, Dr. David Sackett, and it is a commitment of mine to this day. I always acknowledge and value the reciprocity of teaching and mentoring. Facilitating McMaster's Academy group with Dr. Maureen Mead, we share the privilege of working with brilliant research fellows and early faculty dedicated to our specialty. Sometimes in this setting, it's actually hard to tell who is mentoring who. Recall what it was like when you were young. Foster the growth and independence of young people. They are the future. Lend a hand to a worthy but unpopular cause. In the 1990s, for me, it was quality improvement. Back then, basic science mattered most. Clinical research, not so much. And health services research wasn't even in the game. Was quality improvement an unpopular cause? Yes, but it was not unworthy. I knew there'd be more in store for quality improvement. It was just a matter of time. And as a phys ed grad, I try to channel the great Canadian Wayne Gretzky, who often said, skate where you think the puck is going to be. So I've tried to conduct a quality improvement project in our unit every 2 or 3 years, tried to make a difference in my own backyard, standing shoulder to shoulder with nurses, respiratory therapists, physiotherapists, dietitians, pharmacists, social workers, spiritual care clinicians, as we all try to define and deliver and then evaluate high quality critical care. Gradually, quality improvement became more professional, interprofessional, just like our practice. New methods were ushered in and a fresh lexicon emerged. Knowledge translation, implementation science, adoption made room for de-adoption as initiatives such as choosing wisely surfaced. Today, most hospitals, universities, funders, healthcare systems invest heavily in the new quality improvement, indeed a bedrock of our healthcare system. Lend a hand every day to a worthy but unpopular cause, to your colleagues and to young people. My last message is to let passion be your guide. It will not fail you. When you work from a place of passion, you have problems to solve, places to go, and people to meet. You work in crescendo. Intellect, ideas, training, and time, they're not enough. An audacious hope to make a difference helps, but passion fuels you to aim a little higher, think a little harder, and stretch a little further. I've always tried to learn what others are passionate about because their energy can be infectious and inspiring. We all find meaning in striving toward our passion. It keeps the fire in the belly and sustains us through dark times. And we all know there are dark times. At the same time, when a burning flame damps down, when your passion dies, I've learned it can be important to let it go and move on. I've found it necessary to shift or reimagine some aspect of my career every few years to keep it fresh. I try not to keep prototyping, but sometimes to counter-type. And then divine the next passion, something new to learn, something to enhance or even advance. For me, recently it was microbiome modification and its potential in critical care. The challenge of a new body of knowledge, new language, new metrics kept me up some nights, even without the need for a coffee. Striving towards our passion can even lead to thriving. Let's ask ourselves, where, how, and with whom can we make our best contribution? When we are fueled by passion, we have problems to solve and communities to serve. Striving in partnership towards a passion we share with other people can be so energy giving, and we may actually co-create joy at work. Suggestion: always assume that your most important work is ahead of you. Assume it is your job to help change the world, even just your little corner of it. Find and follow your passion. It's up to each of us to make critical care better tomorrow than it is today.
And now, please join us to continue the conversation with our speaker.